Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. All the praise belong to you. You wake up every morning, thankful of what you can do. Just to see. Hey,
Hey.
how are you?
Good.
Doing well.
Good to have you with us, Adrian and Leilani. Hope your week has been well.
It's going well, sorry.
Yeah, okay, all right, good stuff.
Busy one. We're doing all right, though.
That's good. So glad to have you with us. Thanks for joining us for a second session. I know that the first session has been a blessing. People have been talking about it. People have been rewatching, sharing it with their friends. This is a good WhatsApp video to share. You know how you get WhatsApp videos and you're like, another WhatsApp video?
Right.
One that you send out. You get on YouTube, you grab the link, you send it to friends, send it to family, because it will bless them. It will bless them. So thank you, Adrian and Leilani, for being with us once more. We're just going to open up with a word of prayer, and we're going to dive into this session. Father, we just thank you for your love and for your grace towards us, God. We know that we are here by your grace and that you have a plan and a purpose for us. Lord, we thank you for the relationships that you've blessed us with. And God, we pray that in these moments, we would learn how to be better stewards of those relationships, how to love better, how to forgive better, how to serve better. So God, we pray that you would lead us and guide us. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Good to be on with you guys. In case you missed the first session, Adrian and Leilani are therapists, counselors. They are believers. They are blessed. Now I'm going to transition into the phase where the compliments start getting awkward. They are anointed. They are called. They have been used by God in many, many, many ways. And I'm sure that you guys have seen and witnessed some of these blessings. So we're just glad to have you on with us. They're coming to us from Chicago. Or do you claim Chicago, or is it?
Southside Chicago, because no, not Southside. South suburbs, Chicagoland.
Okay, Chicagoland. All right, good stuff. So good to have you with us. Last week we were covering how to survive this time of crisis. It's like we've been in crisis from January till now. We don't even know what July has in store for us, right?
Next week. We have no idea what next week holds.
Right, exactly. Like, let's not even talk about July. Just next week.
Right.
We have no idea. And then we were just unpacking some of the lessons that you shared. So I know I learned a lot, took some notes. I learned that it needs to be that when we're dealing with crisis, when we're surrounded by crisis, we're naturally just on edge. We have less space, less room for the stuff that would have been just nothing in 2019. Now it's like it's something. It's like Arthur Fist, you know, like in 2020. Also, so with that, we need to develop a strategy for resolving conflict before the conflict arises. Also, it's good to set a time and place to manage the conflict. Define the issue. Fast forward the movie in the midst of the issue when you're thinking of, oh, I'm going to say this, oh, I'm going to say that. Fast forward, right? You're going to be with this person for the rest of your life. You're going to have this conversation eventually. Right. So let's not escalate it now. Let's just do the right thing now and work towards the goal of the good of the relationship. And just a few more gems. Put a plan in place. Don't just talk about it. Put a plan in place. Yeah. And then we also discuss things like feeling heard increases intimacy. We have to learn to listen to understand. But you guys dropped so many more gems, and I think that if I were to share more, people would not feel compelled to go watch the video. So you go, you find it on YouTube, you find it on Facebook. These are great. I don't know if you wanted to add anything or if you want to transition into.
Well, can I just say one thing about last week? I want to say the other thing that I don't want to miss is, while I'm glad there were some things that came out of it that you found benefit from that we said, but I also want to say, people shared things in the comments that for us, like, just added so much value to the conversation, right? Recognize we are just two people, right? Yeah. And we've counseled a lot of other couples and have had a lot of experiences ourselves, but that doesn't encompass every single way that things can work. So last week, man, there were a couple of things we've had. I remember someone shared the idea of having the room that you sit in when you know that, okay, it's about to go down. We're about to handle some conflict and work our way through it. And there were just a lot of great gems. So yeah, just encourage people here. If you have something that you know has worked for you, and as we talk about a thriving marriage or a thriving relationship, make sure to share with us so that other people can be blessed by it.
Definitely. We have counselors in the comments. Right? So yeah, we appreciate your wisdom. It might drive the conversation in one direction or another. So
well, every couple is unique, right? And so even though some of these concepts are general, the way you apply them is unique to your personality, your style, the way that you work as a team. And so it's helpful to see how people implement some of these things, or how some people struggle to implement them based on personality. So it's a great feedback loop.
Definitely.
Absolutely.
Definitely. This week, we are transitioning from surviving this season, this half of a year of crisis, right? To thriving in crisis, right? That there is an opportunity in the midst of all of this to do something that will actually benefit your relationship. You don't have to lose or just hang on in the midst of all of this, but there might be some opportunities here. So I'm wondering, how do you define thriving in this season? What would you call thriving?
All right. So the word thrive, by definition, it means to grow or to develop, to prosper or flourish. So we just take that and add the word marriage to it, right? It is a marriage that is growing and developing, a marriage that is prospering and flourishing. And I think a good visual to have for us for this conversation, when we think about surviving versus thriving, is to think of a plant. And you always say, well, what does a plant need to survive? A plant needs to survive food, water, sunlight, right? Give me some dirt, some water, some sunlight, we good, right? That's all it needs to survive. But what does a plant need to thrive? Well, it needs food. And what we dealt with last week was food, water, sunlight. But now we're saying it still needs food. It needs water. It needs sunlight. But there's a host of other things that they're going to need. There's certain types of soil and environment and all these other things that need to be added for it to actually flourish, prosper, develop. So what we want to move on to today is just the idea of what a thriving plant looks like.
For sure. And I think, we can't expect to have strong, vibrant, and thriving marriages if we don't take the time to invest in them. And I know that it's harder during this time to find the time to invest, but that is what it takes. So, I just want to share a quick story because it actually applies perfectly to this scenario. So a couple summers ago, my neighbor, who has like the perfect lawn, she has the perfect plants, like she's just watering them every day. She gave me these bulbs, right, of flowers that I just needed to plant. And, they're these like 3 to 4 foot tall plants. They're gorgeous. They have these red flowers. So I was like, bet, I'm not a gardener. I don't do plants. So this is my first time. I was like, I want to make the side of my house look pretty. So I went.
Sorry, quick pause. Are we the only people who have that neighbor who's just got the perfect yard? Like, I cannot figure out just how come that grass is just
so green.
Everything is just set perfectly.
It's time. It's investment. She's always out there. Always out there.
Anyways, go back.
So inside of my house, so I'm digging the soil. I throw the bulbs. I'm trying to space them out. I'm not even counting. I didn't till the soil. I didn't check the soil. I just dropped the bulbs in. Some of them were so shallow that you could see the top. So I just try to add extra dirt from around it on top. And I watered them. And then I went and continued my busy life. And, I kept checking on them occasionally, but I didn't really do the work to really water them every day. I forgot. I would just come back every couple of days or so. And then, but they started to grow. So I was excited because I'm like, oh, they're growing, whatever. And finally I saw one little one blossom. It's a little bulb, and it's this teeny tiny bulb. And eventually they just stopped growing. And I'm looking over at my neighbor's beautiful, large pots, right? Because she can't put that in the soil. She has to pot, in a pot because she buys special soil and fertilizer and compost, and they're dug deep. And like hers are like these beautiful, luscious, tall plants, and mine are like these teeny little bulbs of flowers that like, you know. And so I looked over and I started realizing like, wait a second, like I thought that my flower was thriving, right? Like, oh, it grew, it blossomed, right? But when I looked over, I was like, wait a second, that's what it's actually supposed to look like, not like this. But when I stopped and I thought about it, I'm like, you know what? I actually didn't put in the work. I didn't put in the time. I didn't research. I didn't learn about the plant. I didn't check whether my soil was deep enough, whether it was primed and ready to have a flower like that. I didn't even like clear the grass, right? I just planted it around the grass. It's like grass and weeds growing everywhere. It was a hot mess. So needless to say, I never did it again. But you know what? It reminds me of this idea of thriving marriages, right? Surviving versus thriving. The reality is that all of us want the results of what a surviving and successful and a happy, vibrant marriage looks like. We want the 3-foot plant that looks beautiful when you're driving around the corner, it's just like glowing in your face, right? But are we willing to really put the work in? Are we willing to do what it takes to not just survive, right? And I just put in the minimum amount of work and it grew, right? So from my perspective, you know, we could be okay. But when you look over and you see, you know, this is one of those things where it's like you're looking at the other side and you're saying, oh, that's what it could be.
It's possible.
It's possible. Yeah. Right. It just gives you that sense that if I actually put energy and time into investing into this, that it will be something that I could never have thought of. Yeah. You know?
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. And it just shows how sometimes we have like 5-foot or 3-foot plant expectations. And but when we're doing like 6-inch plant work, right? And we're just, you know, we're just like, oh, it'll grow, it'll just happen. And then the harvest comes and we recognize like, oh man, I missed out on some opportunities. So yeah, that's a great illustration to start us off. Were you gonna say something?
No, I was just gonna agree that you have to be as excited about the work as you are about the results.
Ooh. Yeah. We have to be excited about the process. We have to be excited about the times when we're putting in hard work.
The journey.
Yep.
That's interesting. I think a lot of people struggle with that. I think it's tough because it's like the journey is not glamorous, you know, it's not Instagrammable, you know, it's not postable. You're not going to get any likes on the journey.
No.
So any tips on how we can be excited about the journey? How do you muster up that kind of joy for the journey?
Sure. So real quick before we jump there, I'll let you jump there now. I think what you were saying, Edsel, is key. I think, you know, there's this narrative about marriages that once you've proposed, once you have the wedding, kind of that's it, right? You have a relationship, you talk, whatever, right?
That's where all the movies end. That's all the fairy tales end,
right? You just live life. And I think really after the marriage, that's when the real work begins, right? And it's about taking that time to really pour into that space, just like you would, you know, there's guys who are watching who are obsessed with taking care of their cars, right? And you gotta pour energy and money into that in order to have the car you want, the way it looks, the way it sounds, whatever, right? Same thing with anything that we're passionate about. And so if we really want vibrant and strong marriages, we have to be just as passionate to put energy and investment into that space.
Definitely. I think it's important to not just want a wedding. A lot of people want a wedding. They don't want a marriage. You know what I mean?
Yes. Yes. And they're grossly surprised.
Right. Like, oh, you're still here. Like, we still have
Right.
Makes sense. Well, I would say then, if we jump into the idea of, well, how do you get excited about the process? I think it's just thinking about where you're going, right? So for us, if we think about one of the first ways, if you're looking to thrive, one of the first things that comes to mind for us is having a joint purpose, right? And the joint purpose is just a belief that God put us together to accomplish something that we couldn't accomplish apart.
Correct.
It's the belief that God puts you together to accomplish something that you couldn't have accomplished on your own. And you say, well, then, what's the benefit to having that? Like, why have that? Is because it brings alignment. It gets us both on the same page, right? When it's, well, why are we doing this? Oh, we're doing this because together we've been put here to accomplish this. Let's move together. When you decide to, should we live in this state or that state, this country or that country, you kind of say, well, why are we together? Well, we've been put together to accomplish this. So if we've been put together to accomplish this, let's move forward in that way. It brings alignment and gets you excited about it. So that's probably the first part for us. Say, how can you do that? It's by having a joint purpose.
Yeah, it's setting aside time to dream. It's setting aside time to set joint goals, right? Yeah. It's important to have your individual goals and individual dreams, but it's more important if you want a thriving marriage to have a similar vision focus where you're going. It's harder to grow apart when you're working towards the same vision, the same experience, the same mission.
Absolutely. It's same thing goes for finances, many other things, right? The statement that I always say is the more you separate, the more things you separate, the easier it is to separate.
Yeah.
The more you separate, the easier it is to separate. So when we're tied together by purpose, when we're tied together by mission, we're tied together by God, when we're tied together by goals and why we're here and belief, when all that ties us together, it's really tough to pick up and go out the door when times get rough, because it's like, man, I've got so much invested in who we are and in where we're going. So that's a good starting point, which is why for us, day one, actually, not day one, week 1, 2 weeks in, somewhere in there, we actually,
the first 90 days.
Yeah, we created a mission statement for our marriage.
Right.
And that kind of helped us with a lot of alignment, to be honest.
Absolutely. And it's helped navigate our life, really, right? What opportunities we take, what opportunities we don't take, you know, what boundaries we set, what boundaries we do not set, you know, what we do, how we do it. It also inspires and allows us to remember that we need to continue to invest during those times where there is crisis and you're trying to kind of maintain alignment everywhere else, you know. And so we said early on that our mission was to kind of reach back to help inspire other couples walk through their own journey towards purposeful marriage. So it's like, okay, well, we can't do that if, you know, we're struggling to invest in ourselves or struggling to strengthen our marriage. And so it's always helped kind of keep us, it's been almost like a guardrail, right? To keep us on pace. And so we encourage couples, if, you know, as part of growing and creating a strong, thriving marriage, to sit down with your spouse and dream, write a mission statement. You know, think about, you know, how, you know, why do you exist? Why do you exist? What makes us us? You know, what were we put together to do that we couldn't do apart? You know, what does he bring? What do I bring? And how can we bring that together to move, you know, towards something?
Yeah.
This is, so you're trying to tell me that the purpose behind our marriage is not to get married, make babies, have a house, work for 40 years, serve in the church and retire? Like that, I don't understand. I've never.
So,
like, there's the checklist, right? There's the checklist. This is like what you're supposed to do in your marriage, right? And now you're introducing a different concept here where your marriage can have a purpose. Can you help us? What does that look like? How do you create a mission statement for your marriage? Because for most people, they're going by the checklist. It's like kid 1, and then church members say, well, where's the other one? And then you're right, kid 2, now you're a boy and a girl, right?
Right.
And they're like,
well, we're done. And it's like,
exactly, right? And then you pay off the mortgage, you buy the house, you pay off the mortgage, you do these things. That's the dream. So what is this that you're talking about?
So best way to think about it is actually there's been a millennial pushback to the idea of just following the checklist anyways. So think about it for yourself as an individual, right? You just kind of go there, you start in the mailroom and you work your way up through, and then eventually you make VP, and then maybe you can get to CEO, and then, you know, you retire at 65 and a half and you get your pension and you live on that until you die, right? Millennials started pushing back against that. Like, wait, no, I don't want that. I want purpose out of my life. But in their marriage, they just bring their marriage just along for the ride, right? I'm going through I want purpose in my life. Oh, and I'm gonna get married. Saying, no, I've been put together. The two of us need to have that. So one of the ways to get that is start with the end in mind, right? Whether it's for yourself as an individual or for you as a couple. Picture your the scene in The Notebook when they're both lying down on the bed and they're just kind of thinking, and they're like, oh, and they're looking back at their love story together. When you look back at your love story together, what would you like to be able to say?
Yep.
If you were to write it, if you were saying, okay, at the end, when I hit 65 and we're both lying down, snuggled up together, wrinkly like prunes, but still in love, at that point, you'd want to be able to look back and just say, okay, what do I want my marriage to say? I'd like to be able to say, when it came from my marriage, that I can look back to a host of other couples who said, hey, because you poured into us, because you believed in us, because you were there for us, because you stuck it out through your own tough times, we believed that it was possible and we kept fighting and we accomplished that. That for me would be great for my marriage, as a parent, and a whole nother thing, right? My kids grew up to do something impactful. That would do it in a way that makes it meaningful for me. So think about the end in mind. Fast forward to then look back and say, what would make this meaningful? And start your process there.
Mercy, that's great. I think that gets into the difference between happiness and fulfillment.
Yeah.
Right? Where we can be pursuing these things that make us happy right now. We get to the end of our lives, we get to the end of our stories, and there's no fulfillment because we didn't do the things that we know that we were capable of doing. We didn't make the difference that we knew that we could have made. I think it's the difference between that kind of fulfillment you feel after you've accomplished something, after you've put in a lot of work.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. The work isn't happy, but
no.
The end result though is like, wow, I made it. And this is kind of tangential. Do you think this is like leads to some kind of like midlife crisis sometimes, where we're like, we hit an age and we look back and we're like, what have I been doing? I don't feel fulfilled.
Absolutely.
Well, you're playing a game that you never thought about. You were just on autopilot. Right. So that I would even say that there are a lot of times we do work hard for it and we are excited for a split second. Then we stop and we look around and we're like, wow, I'm not as fulfilled as I thought I would be when I got here. Right. Mm-hmm. When I thought I had the mansion.
What was this all for? Right. You kind of have that thought, that feeling. And if we think about it, honestly, like companies, organizations, businesses that thrive, what do they have in common? They have a clear vision, a clear path, a clear strategy.
Yeah.
They know what they want the end to be. Even if that vision feels unattainable, they are on one mind. And there's a leader pushing that. There's a group of people who are pushing that. And I think, I don't know why we don't take that same concept, right here, and say, wait, we're a team. We're actually a team that, and if we've been called by God to be a living testimony and also to be disciples to a world around us, then why don't we think we need to do that as a couple?
Yeah.
Right? So why does that exclude us as a unit? And I think there's impact that we have whether we try or not try, right? And I think that's the thing. So it's like, are you going to invest the time to really find that vision and that mission for your marriage? To experience that fulfillment, right? To experience that journey with purpose together.
That's great. That's great. So you said it earlier. I want to ask you to say it again. Can you just say what the mission statement for your marriage is so that we can get a sense of, maybe what ours could be? How long should it be? How many words? Oh yeah. What's the mission statement for your marriage?
Oh, right before she says it again, I do want to say this. Jesse said earlier, make it right for you.
For you, yeah.
So make it right for your personality. Make sure it's something that you can look back on, you can measure, you can notice, but make it right for you. Make it right for you. Now, go.
Yeah. So our mission statement, when we sat down, we realized that we actually did kind of what the questions we're asking, right? So like, what makes us unique? What impact have we had either individually or together? And what do we see ourselves doing together that we can't do apart? And so when we sat down to kind of think of all those things, one of the things that came up for us is like, we've always been we're therapists and counselors by nature, by trade, and it's part of who we are personality wise as well. And so we've always been in a space where people have been drawn to connect with us. And then when we were together, that also started happening. So we realized that our mission, as a couple, is to have a marriage that reaches back to help inspire other couples walk through their own journey towards a purposeful marriage. And so that has helped us just continue to move forward in our marriage.
Love that. Love that. You mentioned, you said you were answering some questions.
Yep. So there are 3 questions that kind of mentioned, but said, so that have been helpful for us. Outside of that first vision, first question would say, all right, why do you exist? Mm-hmm. Why do you believe you exist separately? All right. So why do each one of you guys exist? And then the second part, it says, what makes you you? What makes us us is how we kind of said it. What makes us us? What are personality, beliefs, goals, experiences, past relationships, family, passions? Like, you want to take all that I have, all that she has, and kind of say, okay, when we put that together, what do we see? What makes us uniquely us? Mm-hmm. And then a big one, sometimes purpose, we think of it as something that is fulfilling ourselves, and that's not the case. Purpose is something that impacts those around you. When people think about, when they feel a sense they don't feel like they matter, their value, they don't have any purpose, it's because they believe that if they were gone today, nobody would notice or nobody would care. But when your entire mission is to affect those around you, when you are gone, there's a gaping hole in that space. So that's why you want to say, okay, where have I been called to impact? Where would I find most meaning in impacting those around me?
That's great. That's great. So for the two of you, in terms of helping your marriage to thrive, what are some of the things that you do to maintain that kind of connection so that you can thrive and work towards your purpose?
You want to take that?
Yeah, so I think that one of the things that are extremely important, there's a lot of things, right? But some of the things that are, I think, most important is developing strong communication. And strong communication leads to strong connection. And so those two are, I think, essential to have a thriving marriage. So communication, right? Like we talked about, obviously managing conflict is a big one, or learning how to do that. But setting aside time to talk to each other, literally to have conversations that are not just transactional or based on, what our schedules and what we need to do, but to hear one another, to check in, to have heart checks, right? Where are you? How are you feeling? What's been happening?
Yeah.
Because again, it's about a thriving marriage is about growing together, not apart. And so the reality is that we're always growing. Him and I are always growing. But if we, never take the time to actually stop and talk about what that looks like or what's happening in each other's lives, then eventually, you can wake up one day and be like, wait, who are you? Like, why? Where did this person go that I thought I married 12 years ago? So, communication is a huge part of it. One of the things that we've done, and I'm sure many people have heard about it, is the love languages. So understanding how your spouse receives love. Because that is which leads to another thing we'll talk about in a little bit, but understanding how your spouse receives love. The assumption, and I'll speak for myself, the assumption that I had was that,
if you
loved me, you would love me the way I want to be loved, and we often miss the fact that may not be a natural inclination for your spouse. And it has nothing to do with whether or not they care or, they even, desire to do it. It's more about, it's not natural, right? So let's say for us, right? I grew up in a family, super affectionate, hugs, kisses, and Adrian wasn't as affectionate. And I took that as, you don't love me, do you not desire me? And am I not pretty enough? Am I not doing good enough as a wife? And we had to have that hard conversation, and it wasn't until we kind of were able to verbalize what our love languages were that we were able to really have that hard conversation about, hey, this is actually not natural for me. And so it's funny because initially Adrian would have to think like mechanically be like, all right, I'm putting my arm around her. Connection in a different way. We walking and talking, he felt connection. For me, you need to be holding my hand while we're talking. Like, that's how I feel most connected. And he's like, I'm actually distracted because my hand is sweaty. And like, we're just like, I really get it.
Well, to be honest, I'm saying human beings talk like this. Well, many human beings talk like this, like myself. And for me, I'm holding hands with her. And the fact that she needs to hold my hand when we're walking, I'm like, is there something wrong with her leg? Maybe. I felt like she knew how to walk on her own, but now she somehow needs a guide in order to get around. Confusing.
Right.
So for me, it was restrictive, right? It was literally just like, right? But you learn to speak in a language that they can hear. When you think about it literally, when you say communication, think about it literally like a language. And we do this ignorant thing all the time, man. Like you see someone who speaks another language. Like I've seen when I went to Argentina, I was in South America for a year. I remember we got out there and we said, get off the bus. And this guy who's there, he's like, where's the bathroom? And where's the bathroom? And the person's like, ¿Cómo? And they're like, where is the bathroom? Oh, and it's like,
just add an O at the end.
And he's like, where is? And he's speaking louder. And that's what we do in our marriages all the time, right? Like I'm speaking and you're not hearing me. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to keep speaking louder and louder and louder. And I'm getting more and more frustrated. But the easier thing would be to take a little time and learn their language. If I ask in Spanish, it would be much easier to say like, ¿Dónde está el baño?
El baño. Yes.
Right this way. Right. You know, we can rock. Yeah. So that's the trick.
That's great. That's great. So anything else in terms of communication there's the love languages. In case you're not familiar with the love languages, there's acts of service, quality time, gift giving, physical touch, and I'm always forgetting one.
Quality time, affirmations, gifts, acts of service, physical touch.
Oh, did I catch them all?
I think
you might have missed gifts though.
Gifts.
Oh, I missed gifts? Okay, yes.
I know which one's not your top one then, I'm guessing.
Yeah, no. I mean, for me, it's quality time. But I think what you said is so key, that we tend to love people in the way that we want to be loved, right? So quality time is the way I experience love. So it's like, oh, I'm going to give you all the quality time that I've got. And we forget they're speaking a different language, and we're learning how to speak each other's languages.
Right.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Right. And you only discover that through communicate, right? Through having the conversations that are necessary. Taking time, right? To having those bedtime recaps. I remember, we need to strengthen this one again, but just the pillow talk, right? Like the end of the night, kind of you shut down your devices and you go to bed at the same time. Or at least if not, so sometimes he'll come to bed just so that we can have some time to talk, even if he leaves after to do whatever he needs to do, right? But just that opportunity to connect, right? And I think we lose that, and we separate them. We say, oh, we're having a good time, so that means we're good at communicating. No, they're not. They are not mutually exclusive, right? And learning how to communicate includes listening well, attending well, right? Being able to give back feedback, to be able to be supportive, to be able to, not get defensive. I mean, these are things that take practice and time, but they really are things that we need to invest in and hone if we really want to have thriving marriages.
And don't criticize the other person for not speaking your language. I think that's the thing, right? Like gifts. Let's say gifts are receiving gifts and giving gifts is something for someone. Mm-hmm. You can look at that and go, oh, you're materialistic. That's the problem, right? Now you've completely dismissed a way that they experience and feel and show love because it's not what touches you, right? Or quality time, right? And you're saying, really, how much time does one person need to spend together, right? When you do that, or affirmations, word of affirmations, right? You're saying like, I'm not your mom. I don't need to tell you, you're a good boy. You're a good boy, right? When you start dismissing those things in other people, it stops your space from being safe. Right. And once that happens, the connection is just going to widen and widen and widen and widen. So yeah.
Absolutely.
That's great. That's great. There's a question that came in by Brother Banjo. The question is the purpose for marriage and marriage mission statement part of premarital counseling sessions?
Unfortunately, they are not in the traditional premarital counseling space. The topics you generally touch on are sex, finances, family history, kind of preparing for the wedding, things of that nature. And I think that it is something that is a disservice to the couple. But yes, when we do premarital counseling, pre-engagement counseling, it's part of the conversation. More so premarital, because that's kind of where the couple is getting ready to take that next step
and become one.
But I just want to say that it's not too late to sit down with your spouse, have a date night, light some candles, have your little notepad, or sticky notes or a big whiteboard, and just dream together. And I think that couples don't do that enough, because even if it's not for the purpose of creating a joint mission statement, you have to dream together. There's fun in just imagining where we could be, what we could do, how we could impact the world.
Yeah.
I think that there is not enough dreaming in relationships and marriages, and it really does take out that joint purpose experience. So that's the answer to that question.
And real quick, and just talking about, we didn't really get into this, but in just appreciating our differences in who we are and how we are. Even just now, right? She said, go and sit down, turn on lights, light a candle. And in my mind, I'm like, man, that's gonna be so much harder to read though, because I won't be able to see as clear. I won't be able to see what I'm writing as clearly if the lighting is down, right? Can we just maybe we should bring in some ultraviolet, maybe something brighter, but it's accepting that
whatever setting works for you.
Right.
More so the idea of taking time apart.
I'm with
you. From the regular schedule. You shouldn't be doing it while you're washing dishes and the kids are running around, or you have a meeting to go to.
Absolutely.
Right. And so what I'm hearing is that we're talking about like thriving in quarantine, right? When you don't have a mission statement, when you don't have an end goal, these things, these crises pop up, and it's just like, well, what are we doing now? It's interrupted our rhythm. But if we had a mission statement, if we had something that we were working towards, the question would now be, well, what is it that we can do in this season that we weren't able to do before to work towards this end goal?
Yeah. Exactly.
And as I was hearing you speak, I was just hearing Solomon say, all is vanity. Like when you go into autopilot and then you get to the end and it's just like,
yes, what
was it all for?
Yeah, what am I known for? What will my kids say about? What will my neighbors? What will we have done with? And that's really, I think we get caught up in all of the extra, right? The house buying and the car having and all this other stuff. Those things are okay and they matter, right? But in terms of having a fulfilling life, you know what I mean? It just doesn't.
Sorry, I apologize.
Men and their practicality. Yeah, girl, I know.
Right.
That's a whole nother. Anyway, but yes, I think that.
That's good. There's another question I want to tackle with you guys. It's by Frederica. She says, if a person doesn't speak your love language, does that mean you have to change your love language or tone it down? If you're big on your love language is physical touch, and they're like, I'm not the physical touch kind of person, what then?
If that's the case, so go back to think of it like an actual language. Have patience, right? If her language is Spanish and my language is English, her just screaming at me in Spanish and me screaming at her in English is not going to help things. But her being super patient with me just being on Hola for the first few weeks. Being okay with that probably means that maybe week 3, I'm going to give you a adios or a como estás. I can add a little bit more along the way, and she'll add a little bit more along the way. So for me, it's verbalizing my need. Nyasha hitting practice and time.
Yes.
Practice, patience, and time, right? If you give that, that's why I say don't be ashamed of what matters to you. Don't tone it down.
No.
But don't force it on somebody else.
No, but continue to have the conversation. It's so important to have the conversation, and this kind of transitions us a little bit into the next thing that we want to talk about is just you have to communicate your needs and expectations, right? And I think that there is physical touch is one of my love languages. And I have to communicate that need. I have to communicate that need and share it with him and remind him. And so put a plan in place. Okay, how do we hate? So, whereas before I'd be frustrated, for example, with us, Adrian was patient. We were patient with each other, right? As he tried to increase that for me. And I tried to normalize the fact that it wasn't, wasn't natural for him. And, what I had to, I had to kind of say, okay, well, this is a need. He recognizes that need. He's heard my need, and he wants to help meet that. But I also can't expect that need is going to be met at 100%, immediately, or ever really, because it's not natural to him, right? So it's about us having kind of that mutual respect, mutual connection, mutual patience to continue to work towards that space, where I can now say to him, babe, just hug me, right? Whereas before I would have been like, why is he not hugging me? Like, he doesn't love me. What? Whoop-de-whoop. You go through all these things.
If I have to tell him, it doesn't count.
Yes, it doesn't matter, right? Like, I get as a female, I would get frustrated, and I think that there's probably other women that can resonate with the sense of like, they should just know. They should just know what to do. And the reality is that they don't. Neither do we, right? We don't always know. And I think that we need to have that communication available to have that. But no, I don't think you need to tone your language, tone it down, or change your love language. I think you have to have more conversation and be patient with one another.
Because the reality is, when I hang out with Edsel never asks me like, I just need a hug right now. Like, that's never been something that's come up in one of our conversations. I'm like, oh, okay, you see what I'm saying? That's never happened. So it's not natural, right? It's not going to be natural.
Right. So,
okay, go.
No, go ahead. Go for it.
I thought you go. I want to go for it. Go. Yeah,
no, go for it. Go for it.
Yes? Okay.
Yes.
Here's why managing expectations is important. And this might initially sound hopeless, but I hope it brings you hope. There's research that's showing that 69% of problems in marriages are unsolvable. 69% of problems are unsolvable. Meaning, he's I don't know, I wish he would be more naturally as affectionate as I am. There's a good chance that it's not going to be. Where I saw somebody made the comment, men and their practicality. I'm probably not going to wake up one day and toss that to the wind. In general, that's probably going to be a big part of who I am. Yeah. So you have to then say, so there's no way to solve it. There's no way to eliminate that. He'll always be as clean as I am, or she'll always be able to just, when she's feeling emotional, take her emotions and put it in a box and save it for later. Yes, I can do that, but the fact that she can't do that, that's why I'm not saying it's not fixing the problems. Sometimes there's difference between problems we can solve. Hear me? There's difference between problems we can solve and tensions that we manage. There are problems that we solve, and there are tensions that we manage, and those are completely different. And 78.6% of all statistics are made up on the spot. I will agree with you. But if I was to quote mine, mine's from Dr. John Gottman. His research, 7 principles for making marriage work. Now, I can't say he didn't make it up. I just have to tell you, his came from, I think, a 30-year study of 1,000 couples. Right? Yeah. At least so he says.
That's great. That's great. So it won't be solved, right? If we want to make our spouse like us, we want to make them like me. I want them to talk like me, or to love like me, or to love this the way as much as I love it. You're saying some of these things are just not. A lot of these things are just not going to be solved. No. There are tensions that are going to have to be managed.
Yeah.
Yes, on a consistent basis. It's the reason why you kind of have, if you've been married for a while, you kind of feel like you have seasons where you're dealing with the same thing. You're like, why are we dealing with this again? You kind of have this. Like,
how long was our fairness one? Our fairness season was like how long?
I don't remember.
5 years?
Yeah, on and off. But it kind of proves this point, right? There's just things that the only way that you're going to handle some of these conversations and some of these topics is through having strong communication, and then managing expectations, recognizing what's a need, what's a realistic expectation versus an unrealistic expectation, right? Because prolonged mismanagement of expectations leads to resentment and contentment. And that's the greatest correlating factor in divorce, right?
Period.
It's built up resentment and contempt. And that is brought on by mismanaged expectations.
Yeah. catch this. That is the number one. When you hit resentment, your heart shuts down. Your belief over hope, possibility, all those things. The person who you thought was beautiful yesterday looks pretty not beautiful the next day when you feel resentment towards that person. Right. So I'm gonna make a statement. So for us, a season that we had that lasted a while was the idea of fairness, right? It's not fair, and marriage should be fair, and marriage should be 50-50. And the truth is, and this sounds opposite to everything that I believed I was taught about marriage. A thriving marriage is neither fair nor 50-50. And that's just a fact. I wish there was another way to say it, but a thriving marriage is neither fair nor 50-50. And that's really tough, to be honest. Pulls out here. So let's
I'm leaving. I'm done.
Let's talk about that. Like there are going to be seasons and circumstances that are going to make it where it's just not possible for things to work the same way. She's pregnant. My wife is pregnant. God bless her soul. When she says, I'm tired, she's about to go up and go to bed. And I can't be like, well, I've been going for such and such. How tired do you think I am? I've been awake for 2 hours. You've been awake for 2 hours. How come you? She's like, I am actually cultivating a life in my body. Thank you. I'm going to bed. Right? At that point, it doesn't feel fair that she's on her fourth nap today. Right? Third, two and a half. Right? But it's going to be a season where that happens. If after somebody loses a loved one, things aren't going to remain fair.
No.
If I'm experiencing stress and I'm struggling to manage it and I have anxiety or depression during that season, which might last a week, a month, or a year, we're not going to be 50-50. And it's saying, well, what's my role in that time? Someone, I see the stress pacing and the pulling out hair and those statements. And in that statement, you just have to ask yourself the question. Here's what I say when people ask the question, where it's like, well, are you saying to me, because I say that the role should be, as the husband, my job is to give 100%. 100% to take care of her. Her job is to give 100% to try to meet my expectations. That's what it is. But my job is not to also make sure she's doing her job.
Keep a tally like.
My job is to make sure I give 100%. Her job is to make sure she does 100%.
Right.
My job is not to also make sure she does hers. But it is my job to make sure I do communicate my needs. Yeah. So I'm not saying I keep it secret. I communicate it, but my job is not to police her. My job to do my job is to please her.
Now listen, that's difficult, right? That's hard. And we find ourselves often getting into this like child, adult-like behavior, right? Like you just got home, I've been with the kids all day, it's your turn, right? It's just kind of, this back and forth. It's so common in marriage to do that, right? Like I worked all week. You want to go out? No, I don't. You know what I mean? Like it's not fair. Like I want to have my own downtime, but you want to go out, right? So there's this thing that we get kind of tit for tat that we get in, or I wash the dishes 3 days. You're supposed to be washing the dishes. Why is So I think that is the reality is that if we want to have thriving marriages, we both have to be trying to put in 100. And whenever we do feel like there might be a sense of feeling of unfairness, let's say, because it's just going to happen. You're going to feel that there are going to be times when you're going to feel like I'm doing more, he's doing less. He's pulling more weight, whatever, vice versa. Yeah. You have to have that conversation. You have to have those conversations because those grow. Those are seeds, right? Those are seeds that are being planted and they're growing whether you like it or not. And they're either going to grow into beautiful plants or they're going to grow into resentment and contentment and, anger. And we find ourselves doing that, right? We end up, like we talked about last time, you end up fighting after all these, untalked about, unmet expectations about one thing when in reality, the source of it is something completely different. And so, I know there's a couple questions, and so
yes. Sorry, what you just said is so good. What you said is so good. And I remember I was gardening with my wife last week or 2 weeks ago, and she was telling me, we were talking about plants, and she was saying that, you know, flowers and plants that you want to grow, in order for them to grow, you have to be very intentional about nurturing them. But she said weeds, they just grow. You don't have to water them. You don't have to nurture them. They will just grow if you ignore it, if you don't take care of what you're trying to nurture. So what you're saying is just spot on. It's spot on. Here's the question. How do you express those needs without minimizing what your spouse is already contributing? Let's suppose you're saying, look, I need more of this or I need more of that. How do you express that?
Without minimizing. What was the second half of that?
What your spouse is contributing. Right? Because you're saying they're giving 100%, you're giving 100%, and then now you're saying, well, I need 101%, right? Like, how do you say that?
Well, that in itself is keeping score, right?
Right. Right.
But
so here's the problem with scorekeeping, and I'm going to say it as a scorekeeper. I'm a scorekeeper, right? So I'm not going to speak for anybody else in my room, I'll say for myself. I have a tendency to keep score, and something that hit me was just the idea that well, two things, but I'll just say this one. When I'm keeping score, what's happening is, like, for example, so let me ask you a question here. All right. When you get, and anybody else in the chat, same question. When you get your paycheck from your boss after whatever, 2 weeks of work, and the paycheck comes through your direct deposit, whatever, do you call them up on the phone real quick every 2 weeks and go, thank you so much. I really, really appreciate it. Thank you for what you gave me. Do you do that?
No.
Why not?
Because that's what I'm supposed to get. Like, we set something up. It should be there in the account.
Absolutely. Okay. Yeah. So when we're keeping score in marriage, that's the same thing that happens, right? When I'm doing for you, expecting something in return, I gave you 3 back rubs this week, right? Or I got the kids 3 times today, or I cooked food for you 5 times this week, right? When you cook, the problem is when I'm doing that and keeping score, best case scenario, when she does something out the goodness of her heart for me, I then kind of go, well, it was owed to me. You just paid me back.
Yep.
You can't even celebrate it.
No.
And it may have been something that she sat there, because for those 5 days, maybe it was tougher, but she's kind of like, the 6 days she doesn't feel like, but she's like, you know what? Let me use all of my energy because I love him. All of my energy because I such. And she picks her wonderfully, beautifully glowing, pregnant self up and goes and makes that sacrifice for me and does it. And I'm kind of like, well, I did it for the last week.
You should have done
It's the least you could have done, right? I'm not bothered, but cool, we're now even, right? And she doesn't get any reward. She doesn't get any affirmation. There's no beauty in our marriage. There's no celebration of our marriage. There's no affirmation in our marriage. There's no safe place in our marriage. From the the seed that was planted day one in the garden, right? The snake slides up and comes next to Eve and tries to say, hey, God's not good. God's not good, And you start to kind of sit there and she started to believe the lie that maybe God's not good, and she bites the apple and all that thing goes. But once she accepted that, somewhere I feel like it clicks and it kind of goes, well, if God's not good and I'm made in his image, then maybe I'm not good. Maybe I need to start covering some things up, right? I'm not good. Right. And we've carried that since day one. There are insecurities. We need we need to feel like we're okay. We need to feel like we're enough. Like we are still good. We are still okay. Since then, humanity has struggled with it. The clients I'm seeing, it comes down to that point of just saying there's a lack of value. So now here is my wife in a healing place. She's coming and she's wondering, trying to do this and saying, hey, here's what I've done. And I have this opportunity to affirm that place that the devil has been making dark since the garden. And instead of saying, thank you, I appreciate it. You are perfect in all of your ways. You are in the image of God. I bless God for you. I bless you. Instead, I'm kind of like, it's the least you can do. And she leaves there just the same way that she came, and the enemy leaves with all of the victory he had prior to that conversation. Sorry. I'm sorry. I don't.
Oregon is the appeal.
Right. Yeah.
I'll pull back.
No, you don't.
I receive it. Receive.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yes, Max. You gotta delete that full tally. I know you were up by 6, and you're like, you just gotta get even again. Yeah. You gotta be even.
I don't know what my next question is supposed to be. What were we talking about?
Fairness and managing expectations.
Yes.
And the opportunity, and it really is a missed opportunity for us to recognize how they're trying to love us in their way. Mm-hmm. And I think that, we often miss it because when you're keeping score, you're doing that. You're in this perpetual cycle of, well, he's not doing it. Or when he does it in a way that I wish was a different way, or maybe I expected it would be more, And so we miss an opportunity in that space to just see the beauty of how our spouse is trying to love us and show us love. And because it doesn't look the way that we want it to look, or maybe we are keeping score, then we miss the opportunity to grow.
I think the struggle most people have is, where do I put my, where do I put my unmet expectations? So maybe that's probably the question, right? Like, at the end of the day, I have these unmet expectations. What do I do now?
Right.
So something I had to learn, in our marriage, and I think it's important for every marriage, is that the entirety of my needs cannot be met just through him. I can't expect that all of my needs are going to be met via one person. I think it is a false narrative. I think that it is unrealistic. And it's just not possible. He doesn't possess, unfortunately, he's an amazing man, but he doesn't possess everything that I need, right? First and foremost, I need to be seeking God, right? Because he's the ultimate God who can meet all of my needs. And he put us together, right? But then there are other needs that I need through a community of supportive women in my life who are uplifting me, who are praying with me. I need, confidence to have a space, maybe through a counselor that it gives me a space to be able to share what I'm feeling, when I'm feeling, how I'm feeling, gives me perspective that's objective. It might be through family. I mean, we can't expect that we can meet each other's needs wholly, completely, because we may not be whole, right? Yeah. The reality is that a lot of us come together in marriage and we're not whole individually.
Yeah.
So how can we expect to then now meet each other's needs wholly, holistically?
Yeah.
And so I think there's room there for us to really be able to kind of say, and verbalize it. I think that's one of the things that has helped us be most successful, because I hear this not happening from other conversations that I have with married couples, right? There's a lack of talking. You're feeling something, you have to talk about it.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the things that has allowed us to be successful. Not that it's the only way, obviously. There's lots of ways to succeed in marriage. But for us, I mean, if there is something that is bothering me, I'm going to talk about it. If there's a need that I feel that's not being met, I'm going to talk about it, and not in an attacking way, but we have to. It's the only way. It's the only way that we can actually understand one another better and know how to better meet each other's needs. If we can communicate that, even if it is, hey, I'm feeling empty in this space and I don't know where else to go. I said that to you before. Where else do I don't know what else to do. Right. And so that's allowed us to kind of take that moment to say, wow, we really need to pivot and shift so that we can actually be in a better space.
Yeah.
Wow. That's great. I have so many questions, but I don't want to hog the space. There's a question we have from Marcia. She asks, do love languages change over time? And as we grow, can we expect them to change?
Marcia, I would have initially at one point in time said no to that. But we just had this experience not too long ago where when we were going probably towards the tail end of our fairness discussion season, and when kids were pre-kids, I think my number one love language was words of affirmation and acts of service. And your two love languages, no, I need to get it, because if I don't know it, then I'm gonna get in trouble. Your two love languages were physical touch and quality time.
Yeah.
Okay. So those were hers, right? And then after a season of the kids showed up, and the kids are saying, "Mommy, mommy, poppy, poppy, mommy, poppy, mommy, poppy, mommy, poppy, mommy, poppy, mommy," right? And it's going nonstop. And in the middle of the night, and it doesn't stop at 2 a.m. It's like that neighbor who just has me to, right? That's Jonathan coming into my room like, "I had a bad dream. The walls look different. My toe itches," right? I can't do anything with that, right? So it's in those moments that for us, we noticed, we did the test again, and both of our number ones were acts of service.
Wow.
Because for both of us, it's like, you show me you love me? Yes. Go handle that. Let me.
Show me appreciation for the things tangibly that I'm doing.
Yeah.
Because it's so yeah, Marsha, I would say it does shift. And I think that it is, just like you get a tune-up every year for your car, I think you have to take time yearly or every 2 or 3 years to really check to see where are we, because we do grow, we do change, and we can't expect that the same person I was 10 years ago is the same person I am today. We would never expect that someone is the same after 10 years of life.
Yeah.
Right. So we can't expect that our marriage, our spouse is going to be the same. So yes, we do think that it does change.
Yeah.
Wow. That's so powerful. We have to do the check-ins. I think too often people wait till there's trouble to check in, right?
It's the reason why, we're really passionate about pre-engagement counseling, right? Because couples only come to counseling when they're about to get married and they've already sent out the invitations. It's rare that someone, even if you sit there and be like, "Listen,
guys,
y'all should not get married," okay? Even if you do that and everything points to no, it's rare that someone's gonna cancel their wedding, right? And then the only other time that they come to counseling is when they're on the brink of divorce and one of them is like, "I'm done."
Yeah.
Right? So it's like, how can you possibly help repair something that you haven't been investing time into?
It's harder.
It's harder. It's not impossible, but it's harder. And so you have to check in. You have to set that intention to say, okay, every year, every 2 years, every 3 years, we're going to do a special, we're going to go away for a marriage retreat. We're going to go get counseling just to check in. We're going to do the love languages test and do our, Enneagram. And we're going to just see where are we at that space.
Yeah.
So,
That's great. Mercy. There were a few more questions coming in. I don't want to miss them because we're running out of time. This one says, so what if you do give your spouse appreciation for what they do, but they respond by putting themselves down for not doing it enough?
If you give them appreciation for what they do,
mm-hmm.
but they put themselves down for not doing it enough.
Mm-hmm.
So your response is your responsibility. Their response is their responsibility. So your job is to affirm them and appreciate them for what they've done. If for many of us, our own brokenness has made it tough where we can't even receive compliments. And the reason for that is, I don't want to say, it is, I want to pick a different word in a Christian space. So what other word other than evolutionary in nature? It's
transformative.
Okay, let's say what our brains have been wired to do. It's been wired to remember more negatives than positives. Different research, different numbers. Some say 4 to 1. You need 4 positives to overwhelm a negative. And it's because obviously if I touch a hot stove and I learn that fire burns me, I'll remember that and hopefully never forget it. But learning that water is wet isn't as valuable to my mind, right? But that one experience I'll remember more, which is why if I go to a beach, I don't know, sometime next week, and I see a shark jump out and eat somebody, it doesn't matter. I can go to 90 beaches after that, right? And it'd be safe. I'm not going in, right? Our brains are wired for protection, so we remember negativity more than the positivity. So 2 parts. One, our job to overwhelm with the appreciation and positivity. Second part, if someone's struggling to do that, to receive compliments, that's a space that they may want to process, either with you, and if they can't do with you as a spouse, remember, you are their confidant, not their counselor.
Yeah.
So I'm your companion, not your counselor. So if they need to figure out why they can't ever receive compliments, that's a place where maybe they process that with somebody else.
Yeah, and I think you talk about it, right? I think you find a space and time to bring it up, right, in love and with just curiosity. Like, hey, why is it that every time that I feel like, I feel like every time that I say thank you for something, if it seems like you feel like it's not, like you're not doing enough. Why is that? Like,
exactly.
What's happening? And I think, you have that conversation. It's the only way, right?
Absolutely.
We can't, like we talked about last time, like you can't assume. You cannot assume in marriage, in relationship, that something is the way it is just because you believe that it is, based on your own. We kind of like to grab and pick and choose from, what we see instead of actually getting the facts of what is. So that's what I would say.
That's so good. That's so good. I'm being blessed. I know that a lot of people are being blessed. A question came up of, are there recommended online tools for marriage assessment, i.e. love languages?
Well, I would say that first one, there's a 5lovelanguages.com. You can hop on there, do a quiz for free.
It's a free quiz.
Quiz.
They also have apology languages on the 5 Love Languages website. It's an amazing test. Really, really cool.
Perfect.
There's a,
the John Gottman Institute, so their website, they have free tools as well. So free assessments online and ones that you can pay for, but they have great marriage assessments. We love, this is a personality test, and I know not everyone loves that because, some people feel like it's boxing them in. And I think the disclaimer is these tests are not meant to describe the whole of who you are. Obviously, we are much more complex than a test can show, but it gives so much wealth and language to things that you would never anticipate having language to, or that might take you 10 to 20 years to figure out the language. But we love the Enneagram test, and I don't know if we can put up the link or something there. But it is a great tool for not only having language and better understanding of who you are, but then it also, you can take it with your spouse can take it, and then you can actually see how those 2 personalities best interrelate as a in a relationship. So the blind spots, the strengths, things of that sort. So it's a great tool.
The free path I suggest for people, the best path I found that's free. There are a lot of tests that you can take that you can pay for, but if you do the Enneagram test, you type in Enneagram test into Google, and probably the most accurate one I have found that is free is this site that takes you. It'll be one of the top search, says Eclectic Energies, and take the classic test. Answer it honestly. Don't overthink it. Don't spend more than 10 seconds on a question. Don't say how you think you probably should answer. Just answer what feels right to you. Then from there, once you get your results, take your results and go to the EnneagramInstitute.com or org, but Enneagram Institute. And there you can see all of the profiles. It breaks it down and gives you language.
Once you take the test.
Once you've taken the test, you get your results. And you can actually, as Leilani just mentioned, there's a part where it actually talks about compatibility. Mm-hmm. And it says, oh, how does this type match with that type? And those are the 2 sites that I would recommend for that. Those are great tools for that. Last tool I would suggest is just as a fun activity, when you aren't angry. When you are not angry. So I want to make this clear. John Gottman has a repair list It's called the Repair List. You can find lots of PDFs online of it. Called the Repair List. And what it is, it's all these different statements and questions, you can ask to solve problems when you're frustrated, when you're overwhelmed. Because we've had a lot of conversations like, how do we have communication when we're overwhelmed? Questions, what can I say for example, when I want you to calm down? And what's funny, there's about 12 on the calm down portion. There's about 12 different phrases that you can test out. And none of the phrases that are used on the calm down list, there's nowhere that says calm down. Because calm down never works when you want someone to calm down. It just doesn't. So maybe just go through it, take a day and kind of say, okay, we're both calm. Hey, how would you feel if I communicated this one to you? And hey, can we talk about it later? Or hey, can I take a break? Like there are all these different phrases and you could learn, oh, this is the language that works for you. This is the language that will make me more. If I'm angry, you say this, I'm gonna get mad. If you say that, I'll feel good. So that's a good list.
Yeah.
So when people tell us to calm down, we actually get more upset.
Every time.
Every single time.
I think they should let police officers know this.
Calm down.
Calm down. Hey.
Right, exactly.
It's
Listen,
not gonna work.
listen, communication, okay?
Hey, exactly.
It applies to everything.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Let me see.
There was
There was another question there.
Is there a limit? Is that one? This one? Is there a limit on marital counseling for new couples?
I'm gonna try to interpret that question because there might be different answers. So insurance wise, I'm thinking about the pay portion. If you're self-pay, no. If there's insurance, possibly. But I think that's not what they're talking about. Is how much counseling is too much counseling, I think is what they're saying. I think it's a balance. I think it's a tension that you work through with your counselor. I don't think that too much counseling is bad. But I do think that you can become reliant on using the counselor as a means to keep your relationship healthy. And I think that the counselor's role is really to help provide tools and help you work through your relationship and your marriage.
Yeah.
So,
my statement on day one, if I'm seeing a client, I always say, and I don't usually say this to them on day one, but my first thought when they walk through is, how do I get this to the point where I never see you again? Right? That's my first goal when you walk through the door. However, there are many times with their clients and couples who maybe I'm not seeing you every week for 4 years, but I'm seeing you monthly for 4 years. Yep. Right? But I'm gonna start off every week, then I'm gonna go bi-weekly, then see you once a month, then maybe gonna see you every 3 months, yearly, whatever the case may be. You're just
right. And those are really called booster sessions. So you're just checking in, you're doing a check-in. So that's the answer.
This is great. This has been great. So I'm hearing that in this season of quarantine and the season of crisis with everything else going on, one of the key things that's going to help us is, one, having a good, clear definition of what thriving looks like for us.
Yeah.
In order to have that definition, sitting down and actually creating a mission statement. What is it that I bring to the table? What is it that you bring to the table? What is it that God has called us to do together so that this is our joint purpose?
Yeah.
So that whether we're going through good times or we're going through challenging times, we're going back to our mission statement.
Yep.
Yes, sir.
How can we fulfill this in this season?
Yeah.
And then we'll develop joy over reaching the milestones, right? So I want to be careful that we don't sit down, write a mission statement and say, all right, next week we're gonna accomplish it, right? Like that this is a long journey that we're going on together. And then just being intentional about communicating, cultivating the plant of your relationship, the fruit in your relationship that you want to grow. You have to make the intentional investments in. And you guys gave us some great tools, some online tools for us to follow up on. And then setting a plan and a purpose for like marriage retreats or doing different things that are going to grow your marriage. I think this has been invaluable. I know that many times it's like at the end of a sermon, it's like, I wish I had said this. I wish I had said that. So I want to give you an opportunity just in case you feel like there's something you didn't say that you're like, let me just sprinkle this on top.
I think that I would encourage any couple that's listening, if they haven't done so already, to find a marriage counselor and have just a session, because it wouldn't hurt, right? It doesn't hurt to just sit down and have someone who's not part of your space be able to kind of reflect back what they're seeing, what they're hearing. And I think I read another question earlier that we didn't answer, but communication, and what to do, like what are some good things to do to build that. And I think that's kind of a starting point, right? If you are finding you're struggling in communication with your spouse, and we know, right, we can sense when there's a barrier or there's some difficulty in how we're communicating. We don't feel heard. We feel like we're repeating, things over. We're having the same argument, things like that. I think that it's important that you sit with someone else who can objectively look into a space that is hard for you to see and kind of reflect back what they're seeing, so that okay, here's what we need to work on. We need to work on listening better. We need to work on reducing yelling instead of yelling, but having more conversations. So I think definitely I would encourage that's something I would always encourage a couple to do, is to really sit with someone and just check in.
Or
retreat. Yeah, definitely.
I'd say for me, one thing I'd probably tell is came to mind a story that came to mind. Remember, I was in the barber shop, and if you ever been in a barber shop, I don't know what it's like in the hairdressers, but I know in a barbershop, specifically in a black barbershop, the conversations get wild. And I remember we were in there, and every guy's, oh, my girl this, oh, my wife said, oh, this, my girl, oh, this shorty this blah 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 blah. Everyone's just kind of going through their story and like, oh, I can't believe that. Everyone's railing all these different things, women today, except for me. I was just saying women are awesome and my wife is perfect, but everybody else was just really like, right? And while all of that was happening, I remember like just loud noise, yelling, because that's the only way you can have conversations in a barbershop, specifically a black barbershop. And I remember in the middle of one of the conversations, there was this older guy in the back in the corner. He had, older guy has a hat, kind of picture like almost like the brown suit with the sweater underneath the suit jacket, and he had his cane. And I remember it was like, through all the yelling, this silent voice, it was kind of like, it almost pierced the noise in the room. He just kind of goes, well, you know what I think? I remember at that moment, it was almost like everyone just went, shh. And he started talking, and he goes, well, I heard what y'all had to say, young bucks. That's what he started off. And he began talking, and he goes, for me, I worked hard. I worked hard all of my life. I made sure I put food on the table for my family. I worked insane hours. My wife never had anything that she needed. I made sure she had a roof over her head. Had everything she needed. Sorry. And he goes, and 4 months ago, my wife passed away. And you just hear a pin drop in the room. And he goes, for 3 months, I couldn't touch her stuff, couldn't touch her room, couldn't go anywhere near it. And he goes, about a month ago, I got the courage to kind of go through her stuff, finally, her closet. And he goes, and as I went in there, I found this journal behind her shoes in a shoebox there. And he goes, and he opened it, and he said, I was flipping through the pages, and he kept seeing all of these places where he's kind of like getting ready to hear, my husband was so great because of this, because of that, I've never cheated on her, and he was like, it really hurt me today, and I haven't been able to talk to him about it. But I know he was so tired, so I let it go. Mm-hmm. And today I felt really lonely, but I didn't know what to say. Or today, I don't know what came. I went to give him a hug, and he just kind of brushed me off. And he goes, this man, he's sitting there, man. He's got to be like late 60s, early 70s, man. And he talked about that, and he goes, I sat there, closed the book, and I cried. He goes, because while I felt I was doing everything right, and I felt that I earned the right as the person who's working the hardest in the home and putting the most hours and putting food on the table and whatever the case may be. He goes, I would trade all of that right now to be able to hug her and tell her how much she means to me. He goes, but I'll never have that opportunity. He goes, but he turned to all these guys, he goes, but for y'all young bucks, you still can. I remember he kind of gets up, walks out. I'm like, is he even here to get a haircut? And he leaves, and literally everyone just kind of like, barbershop, silent.
Crazy.
Black barbershop, nobody said a word. All you heard was TV. Everyone just staring at this ESPN the rest of that time. I remember it stuck with me from that scenario, saying, when we once again get to the end of life and find your way backwards and say, hey, the things I'm holding on to, the things I'm fighting about, the things that I feel like, well, I'm more right. I deserve to be. She owes me. In that moment, if I can choose, I'd rather choose to fulfill her, to let her know how much I appreciate her, to say a kind word as opposed to just be right and hold on to my own. I prefer to let my marriage thrive. Yeah. That's where I am.
Well,
and on that note,
we have a lot to think about.
Me too.
Yes, sir. So move it right.
Yes. Yes. I view you both as men and women in barbershops. That's on knowledge. No, we appreciate you. I've been blessed. I'm sure people who are tuning in have been blessed. If you've been blessed, you can go ahead and just state so in the comments. We just want to affirm your ministry and affirm the investment you're making in us, the seeds that are being planted. I know that once this broadcast is over, it's on us throughout the week and throughout the rest of our lives to water these seeds, to cultivate them, to nurture them with love and with the grace and mercy that God gives us as well. So I want to encourage everybody to continue. Next week, we are focusing on parenting in quarantine. And I know that some of y'all who are tuning in are like, well, I don't need this yet. So please be sure to still tune in and to join us for these conversations, these sessions where we're learning and we are investing in growing. Even if you're not in a relationship, somebody just posted single and blessed, and you can walk into your next dating relationships, even your family relationships. These are tools that work across relationships, right? Communication for everybody. So, thank you again for blessing us. We're just going to pray to close out. And, Father in heaven, God, we just thank you so much for these moments to recalibrate, to center ourselves in you and in the guidance and wisdom that you've given us, Lord. Many of us have been living on autopilot, and we've just been doing, working and serving and doing so many things. But God, help us to come back to the mission you have given us as individuals and the mission you have for us as couples, Lord. We pray that you would continue to bless us and that you would continue to give us grace for one another. Lord, we thank you for Adrian and for Leilani and for their children. Lord, we pray that you would continue to bless and protect their household and that the mission that you have given them, Father, would continue to be fulfilled. We thank you for the purpose and the gifts that you've placed within them. Bless us all, we pray in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Amen. Amen.
Thank you all. Good to have you on again. And we will see you next week, same time. Find you on Facebook, on YouTube. And we pray that you will continue to be blessed.
Amen. Amen. Take care, family.
Bye.
Take care.